My personal experience occurred in July of 2009. It was a pleasant evening. I wasn't feeling particularly ill, just tired, so I told myself I'd go to bed early. I had enjoyed a peaceful day at the park with my children. Nothing out of the usual or noteworthy had occurred. As I lay down on my bed that I shared with my wife and fell asleep, I felt really peaceful and tranquil. I awoke feeling terrific, and despite seeing the dark outside the windows, it didn't seem as gloomy or cold as you would think in the middle of the night. In fact, everything in the room, including the rolled-up socks on the dressing table, appeared clean and brilliant, as if everything had its own light radiating from it, which I found odd. I was so delightfully at ease that I didn't even notice it. I sat up in bed, put my left hand down, and noticed there was something on the bed beside me. As I examined the thing, I recognized my scar on my left hand and knew that, despite the fact that I was leaning on my left hand, a second one was nearby. So I shuffled around in the bed casually. Yeah, calmly, knowing what was going to happen. My initial impression, I recall, when I saw my still dead body lying on the bed, eyes closed and not breathing, was, "Oh, he's dead." I had already separated the biological form laying on the bed from the true self or spirit by saying, "He's dead." For a long time, I found it difficult to convey my sentiments at this point in my life or death to anyone, including my wife. It was as if I were in the world's largest stadium and the audience surrounded me, stretched into infinity, and sent nothing but love, serenity, contentment, or ultimate oneness my way. I often imagined them wrapping me in cotton and then in bubble wrap so I couldn't even stub my toe and hurt myself. The impression I got was that the many comprise the one, and the one exists within the many and is everywhere and everywhere at the same time. I was not afraid in the least. In fact, I can't understand what a bad or fearful feeling was like in that environment, and they were a foreign idea to me. All of this was happening while I was still in my bedroom with my family. My son was in a single bed since he had the flu, and our daughter was snuggled up to her mother in between us. Big wardrobes and a dresser piled high with neatly folded laundry. There were no angels, choirs, or judgment. Simply an overwhelming love beyond human knowledge. As I said, it's a sense of being one tiny individual among many that make up a whole. Nonetheless, I was just as loved and valued as everyone else. It's quite difficult to describe, so I'll try again later. As a curious person, a thought began to form in my mind. Having had unusual powers my entire life and being a veteran paranormal investigator, not by choice, I promise you, I recall thinking I needed to establish this logically before figuring out how to get back into that body to tell my wife what I had witnessed. So I sat for what seemed like a microsecond, yet in that time, I was able to think clearly. I assumed the wall next to me was chilly, so tactile touch seemed a natural place to begin. So I leaned against it, and the painted wall was hard and chilly on my face. I recall thinking, forgive the pun, okay, that's cool. I immediately remembered we had left the radio on downstairs for the dog. That's barely audible. Sure enough, I appeared to be standing next to it. Listening to a BBC World Service presenter discuss something or other. I noticed the LCD display clock and decided to try to remember as much as I could before attempting to return to the body upstairs. At this time, I must emphasize that there were no unpleasant feelings. I'm not sure I could have imagined a negative thought in that state. It was a strange concept, whereas this was calm, pleasure, and contentment like I've never had in my life. I adore my wife, children, and family, but this plane of existence was different. In human terms, we don't even have a name for the sensation I had. I retained significant words and phrases, and as the news finished, I wondered, how do I get back to my body? I was already back where I started, without even realizing it. It was then that I realized I had arms and legs. Looking back, I wonder if I saw them because they'd been there for 30 years, and if, like Kirlian photography, my spirit or essence had just painted them in organically since I was used to this form. Despite the fact that I experienced telepathy or verbal communication, I was given a decision. I had a simple choice. I could stay where I was, one component of many that create the one, or I could return to my body and finish my journey. It was absolutely voluntary, and I felt nothing but calm, pleasure, and love. I know I keep saying it, but I can't underline how much this feeling makes me cry, even as I write it, because it feels like I'm losing a major part of myself that will only return when I leave this body. Anyway, my daughter moved, and I saw her adorable face at this point. When I looked over and saw my wife and son, it was as if my decision was decided for me. I had to be a husband and father. They needed me. I had the impression that I could return as the provider. I've forgiven myself and simply gave myself a second chance without being too hard on myself or furious about loss or illness. I instantly felt as if I was digesting 3 streams of information. It may sound strange, but if you imagine screens showing the past, now, and future, and everything you've ever done or not done, will do or won't do and say, and the results of each action and uttered phrase in a microsecond, you will have the ultimate fast-forward life reel. It is difficult to put into words. I'm positive that it was at this point that I heard a voice that sounded exactly like my grandfather's, who died when I was 3 and to whom I was very close. "There you go, buddy. Take another try," he urged. For some reason, I'm always left with the image of a chalkboard being scraped out and a scroll being handed to me, even though I didn't see these things. It was more like I sensed the intention. I then reasoned that because there's blood and fluid in my body, gross, I should stick if I lie down. And I even remember squeezing my nose up as if going underwater. Silly, huh? It was warm and dark as I lay down on my body, which reminded me like a suit of armor, but I'm not sure why, unless it was because it was empty without the occupant. For some reason, I began to vibrate. It's difficult to explain. It seemed as if an electrical current was coursing through my very being. There was a peculiar sound, like exploding candy, and I took a deep breath as if I'd never done it before. My entire body ached, like if I had been flung from a helicopter into free fall, neglecting to deploy a parachute and crashing on my chest. I sat motionless for what seemed like an age, trying to take it all in before turning on my side and gently sitting up. I jolted my wife awake, who turned on the light. I told her what had occurred to me, and she simply listened and hugged me, which made me love her even more. We immediately went downstairs and turned on the radio alarm clock to validate what I remembered. It was almost time for the news, so I jotted down what I could remember. Sure enough, as the news reporter read out the headlines, we ticked off what I'd written down one after the other, which equaled to being 100% correct. My wife prepared a hot cup of tea for me, listened to my heart, and checked my blood pressure and vital signs, all of which were great. I decided I didn't want to go to the hospital and would sit up for a while because I was feeling extremely serene but dazed. This seemed like the right answer, so I turned on the TV, snuggled up on the sofa, and eventually drifted off to sleep. The next morning, after a visit to the hospital with the hospital specialist, who confirmed what had happened with testing, determined that the cause was most likely sleep apnea, details of which, for legal reasons, I'm not allowed to include here.